1 Chronicles 9, 1 through 10, 14. All Israel was registered in the genealogies that are written about in the book of the kings of Israel. But Judah was exiled to Babylon because of their unfaithfulness. The first to live in their towns on their own property again were Israelites, priests, Levites, and temple servants. These people from the descendants of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh settled in Jerusalem. Uthai, son of Ammihud, son of Omri, son of Imri, son of Bani, a descendant of Perez, son of Judah, from the Shalonites. Asaiah, the firstborn, and his sons, and from the sons of Zerah, Jeuel, and 690 of their relatives. The Benjaminites, Salu, son of Meshullam, son of Hodaviah, son of Hasenua, Ibneiah, son of Jeroham, Elah, son of Uzi, son of Mikri, Meshullam, son of Shephatiah, son of Ruel, son of Ibnijah, and 956 of their relatives, according to their genealogical records. All these men were heads of their ancestral houses. The priests: Jedaiah, Jehoiarib, Jachin, Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Meshullam, son of Zadok, son of Meraioth, son of Ahitub, the chief official of God's temple. Adaiah, son of Jeroham, son of Pashur, son of Malchijah, Maasai, son of Adiel, son of Jazirah, son of Meshullam, son of Meshilemith, son of Emer, and 1,760 of their relatives, the heads of households. They were capable men employed in the ministry of God's temple. The Levites: Shemaiah, son of Hashub, son of Azrikam, son of Hashabiah of the Merarites, Bakbakar, Haresh, Galai, and Mattaniah, son of Micah, son of Zikri, son of Asaph, Obadiah, son of Shemaiah, son of Galal, son of Jeduthun, and Berechiah, son of Asa, son of Elkanah, who lived in the villages of the Netophathites. The gatekeepers: Shallum, Akub, Talmon, Ahiman, and their relatives. Shallum was their chief. He was previously stationed at the king's gate on the east side. These were the gatekeepers from the camp of the Levites: Shallum, son of Kor, son of Abiasaph, son of Korah, and his relatives from his household, the Korahites, were assigned to guard the thresholds of the tent. Their ancestors had been assigned to the Lord's camp as guardians of the entrance. In earlier times, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, had been their leader, and the Lord was with him. Zechariah, son of Meshelemiah, was the gatekeeper at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The total number of those chosen to be gatekeepers at the thresholds was 212. They were registered by genealogy in their villages. David and Samuel the seer had appointed them to their trusted positions. So they and their sons were assigned to the gates of the Lord's house, the house of the tent. The gatekeepers were on the four sides: east, west, north, and south. Their relatives came from their villages at fixed times to be with them 7 days. But the four chief gatekeepers, who were Levites, were entrusted with the rooms and the treasuries of God's temple. They spent the night in the vicinity of God's temple because they had guard duty and were in charge of opening it every morning. Some of them were in charge of the utensils used in worship. They would count them when they brought them in and when they took them out. Others were put in charge of the furnishings and all the utensils of the sanctuary, as well as the fine flour, wine, oil, incense, and spices. But some of the priest's sons mixed the spices. A Levite called Mattithiah, the firstborn of Shallum the Korahite, was entrusted with breaking the bread. Some of the Kohathites' relatives were responsible for keeping or for preparing the rows of the bread of the presence every Sabbath. The singers, the heads of Levite families, stayed in the temple chambers and were exempt from other tasks because they were on duty day and night. These were the heads of Levite families, chiefs according to their genealogies, and lived in Jerusalem. Jael fathered Gibeon and lived in Gibeon. His wife's name was Maacah. Abdon was his firstborn son, then Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zechariah, and Mikloth. Mikloth followed Shemeam. These also lived opposite their relatives in Jerusalem and are with their other relatives. Ner fathered Kish, Kish fathered Saul, and Saul fathered Jonathan, Malchishua, Abinadab, and Eshbaal. Jonathan's son was Merib-Baal, and Merib-Baal fathered Micah. Micah's sons, Pithon, Melech, Tariah, and Ahaz. Ahaz fathered Jerah. Jerah fathered Elameth, Asmaveth, and Zimri. Zimri fathered Moza. Moza fathered Beniah. His son was Rephaiah. His son Eliasah, and his son Azel. Azel had 6 sons, and these were their names: Azrikam, Bacharu, Ishmael, Sheariah, Obadiah, and Hanan. These were Azel's sons. The Philistines fought against Israel, and Israel's men fled from them and were killed on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pursued Saul and his sons and killed Saul's sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. When the battle intensified against Saul, the archers found him and severely wounded him. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through with it, or these uncircumcised men will come and torture me." But his armor-bearer wouldn't do it because he was terrified. Then Saul took his sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his own sword and died. So Saul and his 3 sons died. His whole house died together. When all the men of Israel in the valley saw that the army had run away and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled. So the Philistines came and settled in them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his sons dead on Mount Gilboa. They stripped Saul, cut off his head, took his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to spread the good news to their idols and their people. Then they put his armor in the temple of their gods and hung his skull in the temple of Dagon. When all Jabesh Gilead heard of everything the Philistines had done to Saul, all their brave men set out and retrieved the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons and brought them to Jabesh. They buried their bones under the oak in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Saul died for his unfaithfulness to the Lord, because he did not keep the Lord's word. He even consulted a medium for guidance, but he did not inquire of the Lord. So the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David, son of Jesse. Acts 27:21 through 44. Since many were going without food, Paul stood up among them and said, "You men should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. Now I urge you to take courage, because there will be no loss of any of your lives, but only of the ship. For this night an angel of the God I belong to and serve stood by me, saying, 'Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And look, God has graciously given you all those who are sailing with you. Therefore, take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just the way it was told to me. However, we must run aground on a certain island.' When the 14th night came, we were drifting in the Adriatic Sea, and in the middle of the night the sailors thought they were approaching land. They took a sounding and found it to be 120 feet deep. When they had sailed a little farther and sounded again, they found it to be 90 feet deep. Then, fearing we might run aground in some rocky place, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight to come. Some sailors tried to escape from the ship. They had let down the skiff into the sea, pretending that they were going to put out anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved.' Then the soldiers cut the ropes holding the skiff and let it drop away. When it was just about daylight, Paul urged them all to take food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you have been waiting and going without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for this has to do with your survival, since not a hair will be lost from the head of any of you.' After he said these things and had taken some bread, he gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. They all became encouraged and took food themselves. In all, there were 276 of us on the ship. And having eaten enough food, they began to lighten the ship by throwing the grain overboard into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with a beach. They planned to run the ship ashore if they could. After casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and headed for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and ran the ship aground. The bow jammed fast and remained immovable, but the stern began to break up with the pounding of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that no one could swim off and escape. But the centurion kept them from carrying out their plan because he wanted to save Paul. So he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to follow, some on planks and some on debris from the ship. In this way, all got safely to land. Proverbs 18:23 and 24. The poor man pleads, but the rich one answers roughly. A man with many friends may be harmed, but there is a friend who stays closer than a brother.